If we all had it our way, we would have the exact kinds of foods that we need in order to properly break a fast in front of us every time that we're fasting. But we're all human and we all have lives and we all have to go places. So how do you prepare to break a fast when you're on the go? What are some foods you can have laying around, or what are some things that you can grab from the store? We're gonna break it all down. I've got some really easy solutions for you. Let's dive in. All right, so the first one is pork jerky. Okay, I'm gonna break these all down by length of fast too. So the ideal foods for a given length of fast. Pork jerky is really good if you are fasting between, say, 16 and 20 hours. Anything over that, it's a little bit hard to digest, okay? The reason I prefer pork jerky is because it's a relatively low saturated fat content. So only 2 grams of saturated fat for about a 100 gram serving, but we're still getting all the essential amino acids that we need to really kick us out of that fast and actually get us back into muscle building mode, or at least just, making it so we're not catabolizing and breaking things down anymore. Now, you might be wondering, like, why not beef jerky? Well, for one, it has to do with the saturated fat content. We typically do want to keep saturated fat levels relatively low because what happens is saturated fat, we have such a compressed carbon chain lineup that it basically makes it very hard to digest, to the point where we could have what are called lipopolysaccharides leak from the gut into the bloodstream, triggering an inflammatory response. Saturated fats are not bad. Just right when you break a fast, you need to kind of incubate a little bit more fats in there before you actually bring the saturated fats in. But there's a study that's published in the Journal of Food Science and Technology that found that compared to beef, we ended up having quite a bit more thiamine and phosphorus in pork. And if you've watched some of my other videos before, when you're fasting, it's not uncommon to have a little bit of a thiamine deficiency. Okay, so we need that thiamine to come in because it's going to allow us to actually metabolize glucose more, and it's required for all kinds of different metabolic functions. So if we want to have success later on in our fast, we need to restore thiamine levels, and we also need to restore phosphorus, which you're going to get out of the pork jerky, but not out of the beef jerky. Not that beef jerky is bad, it's just right when you break a fast, you might want to lean into the pork. Next up is going to be canned sockeye salmon if you're doing like a 20 to 24 hour fast. The reason I say sockeye salmon is because if you look at canned salmon, if you get regular pink or regular salmon, it's going to be very high fat content. I am very, very adamant about keeping it as lean as you can. A couple grams of fat is fine, okay? Especially when it's coming from the omega-3s, which we'll talk about in just a second. But the canned salmon is a perfect on-the-go thing if you can find the sockeye. You can get that at the Dollar Tree usually. You can find it places, trust me. So yes, we get the essential amino acids that are going to help us out with spiking that mTOR, getting us out of the fast, but also a very high amount of omega-3s. Okay, so the small amount of fats that we are getting are heavily tilted towards the omega-3 side. And there are studies that demonstrate that omega-3s help spike mTOR higher in conjunction with protein, meaning you're going to get more protein synthesis, meaning when you come out of your fast, you're going to be in a much better situation to start building muscle again. Again, even if your goal isn't to build muscle, it should always be a goal to kind of preserve it, right? Also very high in thiamine, very little of a dense fat, very little saturated fat, but you also have astaxanthin, that powerful antioxidant, which is certainly not a bad thing coming out of a fast. Next up is one if you're doing a slightly longer fast, anywhere from 20 hours to 36 hours. Okay, and you could do for 16 hours too, but the reason that I'm leaning a little bit longer is because turkey sticks are going to be a very low saturated fat content. So absolutely you can break a 16-hour fast with a turkey stick, but I'm just trying to say if you're leaning into a longer fast, it's ideal there. Okay, plus very rich in thiamine. The longer that you fast, the more of a thiamine deficiency you can run into. But what's kind of cool is when you look at turkey snacks, a lot of times they are combined with Mediterranean spices. A lot of times you will find oregano, sage, rosemary, things like that, because they naturally go well with turkey. Plus they're natural preservatives. But the reason I like those Mediterranean spices is if you just did a longer fast, they are going to activate PPAR alpha more. What that means is you can potentially prolong the benefits of your fast even after you break the fast. I don't need to go into heavy biochemistry, but basically PPAR is what you're trying to activate during a fast. So Mediterranean spices that are added to like turkey sticks could give you a little bit more of a benefit of the fast after the fast. I usually recommend either Paleo Valley or Chomps. Okay, I'll put a link down to Paleo Valley below. Which brings me into my next one, bone broth protein or powdered bone broth. I love having bone broth right when I break a fast. I don't consider it my literal break fast meal. I consider it what I have right before I break a fast. I almost consider it just something that's almost required if I have it available. But if I'm on the go, it doesn't really work. I can't bring a jug of bone broth with me. So there's bone broth powders and there's bone broth proteins that are out there. The one that I would typically recommend is from, again, the company called Paleo Valley, okay, because they have a really good grass-fed, grass-finished protein bone broth powder. Okay, so literally all that it is grass-fed, grass-finished bones and water. Okay, so there's no hormones, no antibiotics, nothing like that, super clean. So that way if you're on the go, there's no flavors or anything, and you're doing anywhere from like a 16 to even a 48-hour fast, that could be a really good thing to initially break your fast with right out the gate. Plus you're getting the collagen, you're getting some of the gut restoration that comes from that. So I highly, highly recommend that especially if you're doing a longer fast. I'll put a link down below. You can save 15% off because I know those guys and they are a big sponsor of my channel and my life too. So anyway, check them out. There's a link down below to save 15% if you want to try the bone broth protein. Trust me, it is awesome. And I know Matt, I know Chaz, the owners of Paleo Valley, they're super good people. So anyway, check them out. And now moving on, after you do that, you may want to then have a little bit more protein. So you break your fast with some possible bone broth protein, and then you could go ahead and add like an actual pea protein if you wanted to. I don't typically lean into whey protein because I don't like having that much of an insulin spike right when I break my fast. But if you have something like pea protein, it's easy to keep on the go. Okay, so pea protein, you could have a couple scoops in a Ziploc bag and add it to water or add it to almond milk pretty much anywhere you are. Okay, so super easy and super convenient that way, and it goes right in tandem with the potential bone broth protein. In fact, you could literally mix them if you wanted to have the bone broth benefit along with the pea protein. So pea protein would be good for breaking a fast anywhere from like 16 hours to maybe 36 hours. Anything over 36 hours, it might be a little aggressive to bring pea protein into your gut just because it'd just be hard to break down when you have that much of the gut mucosal layer breaking down. Then you might want to lean into the bone broth protein a bit more. Okay, next up is going to be sardines, but there's a huge caveat with the sardines. They have to be in water in this case. Sometimes I have a little bit of a loose standard where I'll be like, go for water if you can, but try not to get them in the oil. In this particular case with breaking a fast, if you can't get them in water, go with a different solution. We have to keep the fats a little bit lower, and sardines already have a little bit of fat in them. So if you can find sardines that are in water and also skinless, then you save even more. Okay, so then you're getting the vitamin D, but you're also getting the omega-3s like we talked about with the canned salmon, plus extremely economical. Sardines are very inexpensive and easy to get almost anywhere on the go. Literally, again, at the dollar store. If you have to get them in oil, rinse them off in a bathroom sink somewhere, whatever. But one thing that's overlooked a lot is the B12 content. Okay, B12 is a highly water-soluble vitamin, and when we're fasting, remember, we're urinating more, which means we're losing our minerals, but we're also losing water-soluble vitamins like B12. There's 150% of your daily recommended value in one 100-gram serving of sardines of vitamin B12. So you're gonna be off to the races there. So highly, highly recommend that. And sardines I would usually do for like a 16 to 24-hour fast. Beyond that, again, we want to start leaning into the easier things, some stuff's a little bit lower fat, so it's a little bit easier to digest. Okay, then we get into some of the looser stuff. Okay, hard-boiled eggs. I would not recommend having a hard-boiled egg for anything longer than like a 16-hour fast. Okay, but I put this here because I know you might occasionally do a shorter term fast. And a 16-hour fast is perfect length. It's nice, it's easy, but the benefits tend to start at 16 hours. But if you are doing a shorter fast like that, a hard-boiled egg would be okay. Just lean into a pasture-raised, not just free range or not just cage-free, because what you are putting into your body right when you break a fast is so unbelievably important. Then it brings me to this last one, which is one that I wouldn't really recommend doing for anything over, like, again, 16, 18 hours, but there's a specific reason for it. So hear me out. Normally, I do not like to break a fast with any dairy. I generally do not. Okay, but if you know that you tolerate dairy okay, I would rather you lean into a very good quality cottage cheese, one that doesn't have carrageenan, one that's preferably grass-fed, grass-finished cows. Okay, that would make a big difference. Okay, do not go for like whey protein, do not go for things like that. The thing about cottage cheese is it can suppress insulin a little bit. So here's what can happen. Right after we break a fast, what will happen is we will have an insulin spike, and that insulin spike will cause a big flux of all your electrolytes that are in the bloodstream to go into the cell. This can leave you with unstable blood electrolyte levels. So even if you have protein, it can spike it, and you know your body well. So if you tend to feel like you get really foggy or weird right after you break a fast, it could be an electrolyte issue. And one of the best ways to combat that, in addition to of course having electrolytes, is to have a lower insulin spike. And cottage cheese has been demonstrated to have a much lower insulin spike because it is mainly casein proteins. So anyhow, not something I would lean into all the time, but it's worth an experiment because it's very easy to find cottage cheese at pretty much any grocery store. You just don't always get the cleanest version. So just to recap, pork jerky for 18 to 20 hours, canned sockeye for 20 to 24, turkey sticks for 20 to 36 hour fasts, bone broth protein for anywhere from 16 to 48 hour fasts, and again the link is down below, pea protein for anywhere from 16 to 36 hour fasts, hard-boiled eggs for a 16-hour fast only, sardines in water for a 16 to 24-hour fast, and the cottage cheese used sparingly when you want to test it out, 16 to 20-ish hours. I'll see you tomorrow.